I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Gary Webb. I am an investigative journalist, and in 1996 I wrote a series of stories entitled Dark Alliance, which was about CIA involvement in drug trade.
Are you a man who once said death smiles at us all? All a man can do is smile back.
We've opened Skull and Bone, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go on.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the rest.
Number 322.
I sad duty to report this afternoon that my friend and colleague, Tim Russert, collapsed and died early this afternoon.
I may die in this cell tonight or in the arena tomorrow. I am a slave. What possible difference can I make?
And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Already Deadheads, welcome back to your favorite live weekly call-in conspiracy show with your favorite Jose Galison and Austin Picard, the Schizo brothers themselves, with an honorable mention of Jacob chilling in the back. Pleasure to be with you guys. This is my first bit of content of this week. Sorry, the internet feds have been working full time, but I've upgraded my internet. I mainlined my internet. We very much reached the point of it is what it is if it gets fucked. But hey, we persevere in our battle, our forever battle against the online feds. But it's a pleasure to be here alongside you, Austin, fighting them together. How's your week been? How's the internet feds been treating you?
Man, honestly, my internet's been okay, but my TV's basically destroyed at this moment, so I'm trying to figure out. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's annoying, but I should be focusing on. Really, what I'm trying to do is distract myself in a real way. I think from some of the more, I don't know. I'm realizing that just in terms of like the schizo kind of permanent plight that we're experiencing on a weekly basis. We have Kim Kardashian effectively being a cocaine smuggler potentially. We have so many different things going on at this moment. I think the CIA is allegedly a part of some sort of alien hybrid hunting program, right? Utilizing 23andMe. We basically have another kind of disingenuous peace proposal in the form of the Abraham Accords playing out in the current moment in terms of foreign policy, while escalating tensions in Cuba in crisis type of thing as a coup d'etat, eerily similar to that occurred in Venezuela, right? The exact same playbook effectively coming to fruition. My God, beyond that, man, I think there's an additional agenda that should be prioritized and addressing as well. And I think that's the Project Stargate and the AI infrastructure program or project. So all of those things kind of coalescing in the right media environment, not really given the proper spotlight they deserve in terms of this dystopian outcome in a real way. I think I'm constantly trying to distract myself from each and every one of those ridiculous kind of agenda items on a weekly basis. But what I've realized is that it's almost taken an emotional toll in terms of, I think, a lot of the overexposure as far as the pedophile sex trafficking operations at large. And I was thinking through it. I was like, man, essentially the solo projects that I have been focusing on have entirely almost framed my podcast as almost prioritizing these prolific pedophile networks, and that's not exactly what I want to only cover, right? And so I kind of realized that, even though I'm very much down the rabbit hole and effectively coming out the other end in terms of resurfacing as far as much of the investigative research in regard to the Odyssey Foundation, John David Norman, the Delta Project, all these.
I mean, you're kind of mapping the neural pathways of the establishment if you think about it. So it's like, well, it does seem like you're losing your mind. It's the only thing you're doing. You're like, you are mapping out this entire thing. This you're essentially showing the brain of, essentially mapping out the neurons, the little pathways of essentially the devil, almost, if you will.
That's why I think it's so kind of, it's almost an addiction at a certain point, because I want to fundamentally create a framework for myself to understand, how exactly this power paradigm has come to fruition, has evolved over time, and is currently structured, which we're always behind the curve. And so, anyway, the point being is that I've been, I think, enduring an emotional toll in terms of just psychologically, in a subconscious way, not being entirely aware of it. And then it basically kind of developing over time into me dragging my feet, not necessarily wanting to, overexpose myself on a daily basis. So, it takes so many hours to do this, right? And so I found myself pivoting and going down different rabbit holes and coming out, essentially for my weekly shows, talking about things that essentially I could almost form into a solo project of some kind if I wanted to. But anyway, this is my own personal plight. I apologize. The point being is that I've definitely, I think I've finally acknowledged the root cause is essentially that, my soul is effectively crying out from within my subconscious mind saying, give yourself a break emotionally, in terms of, the sinister nature, right, of overexposing yourself to that level of disturbing details. And so for my own well-being, I'm just trying to reassess exactly where I will go from here, in terms of like the next few things I will focus on and prioritize as far as things I hope to cover.
Go focus on like Epstein Ponzi schemes or something, like like be like parallel but not like directly, you're
Right,
proving
right.
out some substantive portion of one of the more salacious things out there. There's something to that. I don't know.
No, there's a
But
lot
yeah.
on the shelf. I think it was more so the again, like this desperation to continue on the case of tracking down this very strange overlapping nature of these, just the network in itself, and how it really does surface with these overlapping perpetrators and things of that nature. Anyway, that's a whole nother kind of topic we can get into, my own personal kind of process anytime. But I think what's relevant in terms of just the demoralizing media cycle of the week, there is, other than the foreign policy we can discuss later on, honestly, I think there was one example that, again, this is the reason that I thought of the soul-wrenching toll that effectively emotionally, takes root in terms of the overexposure. But naturally, in regard to a pedophile-occupied government, we have overwhelming, extraordinary cases, just overwhelming examples on a consistent basis. And so what do we have? We have this attorney from Waco who's one of Trump's MAGA warriors, right? Did you see this? And apparently this attorney was effectively charged, right? But kind of got off in a real way in terms of the individuals who went to bat for him and effectively let him off from any real, let's just say,
You get like
what?
no time, if this is who I'm thinking of, basically, right?
Yeah.
Something crazy like 6 months
Adam
or
Hoffman.
something.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I wonder what the origins of that last name is. But go on.
Okay. Yeah, so he's been obviously released from jail for good behavior, allegedly. And he's a 49-year-old attorney from Waco, Texas. who basically faced life without parole for repeatedly raping a young boy until the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton offered him 1 day in jail and no need to register as a sex offender, basically, right? A judge then increased his sentence to 60 days, right? And he got out in 30 for good behavior. So that's effectively what took place. But when you actually look into this case, he basically spent 1 day in jail, and this is a person who was essentially kind of, as far as no sex offender registration, yes, but Donald Trump endorsed Paxton just recently, right? And so that in itself, as far as Ken Paxton's office going to bat and offering this child molester a 1 day jail sentence is, letting him off entirely, is kind of par for the course in terms of the pedophile occupied government. And so Adam Hoffman, again, 49-year-old Waco attorney, he, I believe, was offered a deal to plead guilty to two misdemeanor to just two misdemeanor charges and serve only the single day in jail. The deal was signed off on by the Office of the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, and that is the man Donald Trump endorsed and called, quote, a true MAGA warrior. And so, anyway, the fact that Hoffman was basically originally indicted on first-degree felony continuous sexual abuse of a young child. In Texas, the charge carries a minimum sentence of 25 years and a maximum of life without parole. Hoffman's first trial ended in June 2025 with a hung jury, 7-5 in favor of guilty. The judge then declared a mistrial, and the case was set for retrial. And the local district attorney in McLennan County had already recused himself because Hoffman was a fellow Waco lawyer and a member of the same legal community, apparently. So there was a conflict of interest. And the case was then handed off to the Texas Attorney General's office in 2023. And then by the time of the retrial, Paxton's office had been running it for 2.5 years at that point. And that is when they effectively kind of just obviously in terms of the legal consequences involved with this individual, none are to be had whatsoever. And this plea deal is entirely a cover-up and a facilitation of a cover-up in terms of the level of abuse that he is legitimately guilty of, in my opinion. So I don't know, man. In terms of the details, this is just, as I said, par for the course. And unfortunately, we're surrounded by this pedophile class. And until people begin to realize that fact, right, which is another reason why I think, it does have a soul-wrenching toll, in terms of the demoralization is the fact that how many different examples do we need, right, until, I don't know, maybe the priority becomes to not necessarily, and you already know how I feel about protests, but to not necessarily be out in the streets protesting over culture war issues that, make no real difference in terms of the ultimate end goal and the true underlying agenda at large. But man, if we're not prioritizing an attempted cleansing of the entire political class at this point, then let alone restructuring the system at large. I mean, it just seems like I'm at a loss, right?
Yeah. So if you're looking at anything redemptive in the federal side of things, at the very least, like I don't know what world you're living in. I mean, maybe I could see some arguments, some states, some places, some localities, but federal, just throw that shit out the window. People need to get over that. It ain't 1776 anymore. I'm sorry, and the idea that we're going to, have a revolution and bring it back, probably not. But I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I mean, hey, but they are trying to frame us all as revolutionaries. I mean, you've been seeing they've now added the AI, AI haters into the fold of the amorphous blob that is, I guess, kind of what NVEs, isn't that what they're calling them or something, or just kind of their general people to be on the lookout. We'll find you, we'll kill you, that sort of rhetoric that they've been flaunting about. Now they're throwing AI into the fold. So it's kind of becoming this little bit of a Jewish trick of sorts, where it's kind of like, hey, here's this super wide it's kind of like almost like Jew, like the word
Right.
Jew, like if it's got we can make it work how we want to. It's like I went, oh, you're against genocide over in Gaza. Well, I guess you must be kind of like one of those Muslim extremists. So you're a Muslim extremist, so you fit in this little terror paradigm of whatever we're calling an NVE or whatever fucking acronym we're using. And now you are to be considered essentially akin to a terrorist. So
100%.
And then Mr. Teal gets your booty hole.
Yeah. I mean, that honestly, when you see, and we've been discussing the slippery slope of, prioritizing and dishonestly targeting the First Amendment through these very deceptive, techniques, right? Where they essentially appeal to your emotional triggering mechanisms that they've implanted in you through generations of conditioning in a real way. And I think that when you can see the federal government directly targeting any sort of activist or dissenting voice in regard to opposing or being in league with anti-AI and data center projects, right, in terms of just really just kind of opposing the overall Project Stargate and the AI infrastructure project at large. They created, I mean, the authorities, U.S. authorities and essentially U.S. law enforcement has created an entirely new threat category is basically what it is, right? This anti-tech violent extremist. And so I looked into this and read through the Wired article that basically was published saying U.S. law enforcement warns of anti-tech extremism as AI hatred grows. And there's a portion of it where essentially they talk about this tranche of documents they obtained. And it was apparently New York Intelligence and Counterterrorism Bureau report that warns of this widespread upheaval in response to AI adoption. Of particular note is a novel term for what the Bureau purports to be an emerging extremism threat. The chaotic atmosphere that may result, this is a quote from the actual report, the chaotic atmosphere that may result from emergent AI technology in the next 5 years may fuel large-scale protests that devolve into civil unrest and anti-tech violent extremism activity, especially in large urban areas such as New York City. The term anti-tech violent extremism does not appear in any publicly available DHS or FBI domestic extremism reports or guides and represents a novel grouping of a wide range of ideologies under a single extremist category. So this seems to be laying the groundwork fundamentally. And also, this is the totalitarian technocratic takeover, which we've been, years now at this point, we've been having this very same conversation. And to me, this specific publication and article that I read through, once I actually went to the report itself and I was reading the actual language they were using, it's another perfect example of how the permanent establishment is it's conscripting the general public into funding the very totalitarian technocratic takeover through this dystopian AI infrastructure project Stargate, while laying the foundation in terms of constructing the digital prison we will all obviously reside in. And the ultimate goal, in my opinion, obviously, is, of course, requiring the 15-minute smart cities, as well as the abolishment of private vehicle ownership tied to the new age social credit system, complete with the dystopian form of the central bank digital currency concept. And it will come in one way or the other, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a CBDC. It could be some sort of private cryptocurrency, that they potentially weaponize for that very purpose, but it will still effectively be the same exact strategic concept. Now, simultaneously, the sophisticated mind war operatives, right, they're subconsciously injecting the very false premise of any dissident voices or genuine grassroots movement who would naturally be philosophically, intellectually, or above all else, ethically opposed to the formation of this totalitarian technocratic state as dangerous domestic terrorists and radical revolutionaries. So at this point, it's like, we have to acknowledge, welcome to the brave new world and the new age globalist framework. This is really how it seems to be honestly taking root in a real way. And this is the what's the term? It's the fuck. There's a term specifically for it's in its infancy. Thank you. Damn it. I couldn't remember. But it doesn't feel like it's necessarily come to fruition in a real way other than laying this fundamental groundwork for the overall agenda at large. I see obviously the flock camera systems and things of that nature, which are clearly being very much implemented on the ground level in terms of this mass surveillance protocol in regard to the overall infrastructure project. But the only final point that I really wanted to make in terms of this kind of directly this AI counterterrorism strategy is what they're claiming it is, right? In terms of anyone who's reacting to this AI data center project, they say basically, the same Intelligence Bureau assessment, analysts described a novel threat emerging in the wake of the arrest and trial of Ziz Leota. Is that how you pronounce the name? The Zizian case.
Yeah. That's how I pronounce it. Yeah.
Okay, so an extreme rationalist who allegedly led a small cult-like group. This is how they frame it, right? Which I found to be very disingenuous. I felt almost as if this was one of the essentially the foundational pillars in terms of the subconscious deception they would hope to apply and inject into the interpretation of this entire reaction in a reactionary phase to the AI infrastructure project. So to even mention the Zizians, I thought was interesting. I mean, it makes sense, but still, members of
it makes sense, but it's also confusing since like they're kind of grouping these together and they're kind of the opposites. But I guess if you're making the argument of extremists, right. I mean, the Zizians were kind of, from my loose understanding, is they got really big into like effective altruism, and they very much were in that like Silicon Valley sort of philosophy that was going around, like trying to find out like the maximum out of like ethical choices one can make, and starting with some kind of like absurd conclusions. But essentially, I believe like with it, one of the many things they kind of believed in was some variation of like an AI god or this or that. So I do think it very much is like tech-y. So they're extremists, but they're like not like anti-AI. But if you're kind of grouping it all together and just kind of like extremists, I find that kind of interesting. It's kind of like a little bit of an as above, so below. But there's also the component of like, when kind of grouping these things all roughly together, you can kind of play with both. You can play it both ways. For example, like with the NVE, like the nihilistic violent whatevers, whatever it stands for, extremists. That includes things like 764 and 09A, which are legitimate problems. But then you can also kind of, with these acronyms, kind of loosely group in other things that are a little bit less applicable, like maybe just people protesting AI or something. But I mean, this is kind of I don't. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it makes me think of like some of the association that's been tried to be done by like the Teals of the world, of associating that as like an anti-human behavior essentially, or something like that, to be like encroaching upon progress is essentially like it's like the antichrist sort of behavior, like framing it in that way. So this is where you can kind of like frame all of these loosely as like nihilists or something like that, or just vaguely bad,
Yeah, and they're essentially trying to frame any dissenting opinion in terms of the new kind of framework is anti-technology extremist is basically what they're framing it as. So it's very much vague in terms of how you could apply that, right? And as far as the category itself, but it's over 1,000 pages of apparently this report from the Department of Homeland Security. FBI was involved in fusion centers, apparently obtained by Wired was the original publication that published this article. But they showed essentially through the fusion centers and the FBI Homeland Security report that a national shift was taking place to surveil this new and worrying broad category of people and activities deemed an emerging threat. And I thought was interesting is that this was basically, it directly followed Trump's National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, apparently. And this instructed the Department of Justice to target anyone holding, quote, anti-American, anti-Christian and anti-capitalism beliefs.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting to me.
Yeah, especially like I've played around in theory so much that it's like I know what a squirrely game that is. Like literally the most annoying thing about capitalism socialism debates is they all immediately devolve into defining what it is. No one agrees upon the definition. So even just from upon capitalism, hell, I in a certain sense, depending on how you're looking, in a Konkinian sense, I'm an anti-capitalist. In a Rothbardian sense, I'm a capitalist. So it's like even like if you're like not understanding like what these terms mean, like, and now you're entrusting the government to, you know, create these rough classifications of people, it's just ludicrous. Really. Yeah.
But for Sebastian Gorka, and he has a very checkered past in general, as far as, I mean, that applies to the vast majority of these, you know, obvious lizard people and members of the swamp, we can say, as far as the current administration and just consistently remaining in DC, obviously, the perpetual reelection cycle. But anyway, it was Trump's counterterrorism expert, Sebastian Gorka, or, you know, whatever his position is with counterterrorism. Essentially, he released his counterterrorism strategy following the National Security Presidential Memorandum. And the counterterrorism strategy has within it the claim that left-wing extremists are one of the 3 top counterterrorism priorities facing the United States.
What are the other 2, right and center?
Exactly, man. Like, it's just the most insane thing that we're living through this very much. It's a dystopian kind of precedent-setting notion in terms of what the public is willing to embrace and allow as well, right? I mean, there's not too much we can effectively do about it, but you would think there would be much more, you know, public reaction in terms of realizing that you are becoming the priority target by your own government, and if you haven't realized that by now, you're not paying attention, and they will categorize you in whatever way they view fit. They will create categories for you if you don't necessarily fit perfectly into the box, or they will just misrepresent what you stand for and the principles you uphold in order to entirely condemn you and judge you accordingly. So this is the authoritarianism at work that in modern day, in the current moment, and there's no 2 ways about it, you know. And so I do think, man, I need to put an actual sign out front of my house that says legitimately, like, just to keep people from coming up and knocking and ringing my doorbell and shit.
Is that what that was? I didn't even notice it. Okay, you got a solicitor.
Anyway, they harass me out here.
Crash out on them. It'd be good for the stream.
Right. But no, the final point really is just that Zizian connection that they referenced at the kind of the latter portion of the article. But as they were kind of presenting it, was that Zizian ideology, this is how they presented it: extremist in nature, a less extreme version of the same fears surrounding the cataclysmic potential of AI, are a common concern among AI alignment experts, machine learning engineers, and even frontier AI companies. Nonetheless, the Intelligence Bureau warns that paranoid views regarding AI may proliferate in the aftermath of the Zizian's trial, thanks to their attempt to reason the belief that a godlike incarnation of AI is imminent. In belief that humans must best use their time in the present to devote themselves to ensuring its compliance with human morality or face existential consequences for failing to do so.
Huh. That's an interesting way. Okay, I see what the trick they pulled there to be able to squeeze the Zizians into an anti-tech or anti-AI ideology, because I guess if you frame it as, because I think from my understanding is like, yes, they do agree there's some sort of AI god, and it might even like kind of, you get into weird territory when you get into this stuff, like the thought experiments of like, and this is why some of them are so obsessed with being so incredibly altruistic, because they're of the belief that there's this future AI that's somehow going to make them take into account for the things they do. So it gets bizarre. So, but I guess in a certain, you can see that as like an anti if they're trying to adjust their lives in an extreme way to it. But if anything, you'd think it'd almost be like a pro thing. But I don't know, whatever. From my understanding, the Zizians, I would have seen them as like a pro-technology, extremist of some sort. But
no, especially the 100% a part of Sam Bankman-Fried. You remember that entire? I mean, that was the most corrupt example you could point to as far as some sort of privileged, unimpressive kind of genealogical product of this aristocratic system in reality, kind of necessitating this framework in a real way that can always be overexposed because of the level of unimpressiveness, in terms of the individuals involved. It's interesting, but I do believe that the Sam Bankman-Fried fallout was entirely designed by the CIA to effectively take place and maybe even create some sort of legal pretext they could rely upon moving forward in terms of these, crypto outlets, things of that nature, these private crypto companies, and what was SBF's entire altruistic coin. What was it called again? I forgot at this point. It's been a while. Yeah. Yeah, it's so hilarious whenever you read through the ideological, principles they claim to in a real way kind of represent and practice. But anyway, there was one final point in regard to these fusion centers that I found interesting. And these fusion centers were basically created in the wake of 9/11. You had 80 fusion centers now essentially all over the country serving as go-betweens for federal intelligence agencies and state and local law enforcement. So basically, they're saying, in addition to concerns about portions of the American populace disturbed by the rapid proliferation of AI, these centers are also gathering and circulating intelligence about alleged threats to data centers. So all I'm saying is that you are public enemy number one if you're essentially hunting down flock cameras and attempting to, and I'm not going to be the person to tell you, obviously, if you're doing something like this, you're putting your own future at risk, is my only opinion, just because.
But there is reward in that there is plenty of precious metals and all of those things. So
right, I'm never going to tell someone not to do it, and I won't necessarily, because hey, I'm not trying to control anyone's actions, other than don't commit out and out crimes in terms of legitimately involving victims of some kind, right? If obviously I don't believe committing suicide is a crime either, but what am I to say? I think I
think we can all agree victimless crime is awesome. Okay, but let's move on.
Right, exactly. But take precautionary measures, obviously mask up, act as if you're one of the crowd in a way. But I will say that there has to be some sort of grassroots effort to counter this dystopian and authoritarian technocratic state that is taking form around us. But yeah, man, just I didn't realize that these fusion centers had such a major role to play, right, in regard to just post 9/11 and apparently Western Pennsylvania Fusion Center, for example, claimed that, quote, adversarial actors, including state-sponsored entities, criminal groups, and extremists, such as homegrown violent extremists or environmental extremists, may target U.S. data centers, and that these actors could also exploit the strategic importance of data centers to the U.S. economy, using them for activities like cryptocurrency mining or leveraging third-party entities such as front companies to gain access to U.S. data and infrastructure. But there's a lot more, to it. I would actually encourage people to go read that report because, man, the national security, reports and these memorandums and counterterrorism strategies are important to know because will effectively set the stage for what's to come. And so I do think we're going to see a sort of ratcheting up in just unfortunate examples that we can point to as far as people legitimately trying to take this into their own hands to some extent and then enduring some sort of criminal litigation process as a result. And I hate to see that, but unfortunately, this is the dystopian reality we exist in. So,
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
like they're I mean they're making these things to use them. I mean if you're noticing that these are ambiguously defined, I mean it could be for a reason. By the way, I do want to remind people let people know the phone lines are open 1-833-722-3323. That's 1-833-722-dead. But yeah, what the heck? Dang, I lost my train of thought there. What we were just talking about. Damn it.
Well, there's we did talk privately about Andreessen, just as kind of like a dovetail into all of this, going back on Joe Rogan's podcast to basically Mark Andreessen, by the way, for anyone who's unaware, he's obviously this totalitarian operative who's just attempting to set the stage for subconsciously inviting the general public to embrace this dystopian outcome as far as the technocracy itself, including flock cameras, which he apparently is very much interested in. He's the one who was saying we should have an AI overlord, and an AI government is basically what he views as the solution to the human element, right? As if that is the main crux of our problems. When in reality, we know that will be an extra layer to the plausible deniability that they effectively consistently manufacture for themselves, as far as the political aristocratic, genealogical power cabal behind the scenes for generations that clearly just consistently are kind of what's the term, as far as the rotating anyway, it doesn't matter. Just they're always reelected. They're always repositioned and very prominent, in terms of their influence, their ability to kind of continually push forward the agenda at large. And so it's the constant bipartisan nature of kind of exploiting the private sector to not only for that purpose of plausible deniability, but to essentially achieve your goals without technically claiming any real responsibility for it. But anyway, so Mark Andreessen goes back on Joe Rogan, and what does he have to say? Well, he decides to take up the effort of defending the flock camera safety systems. And he decided to say that flock safety and shot spotter are automated policing technologies used by law enforcement to detect gunfire in real time. They couldn't track the shooters in Austin. I'm not entirely sure which shooting he was actually referring to, but he says that they couldn't track the shooters in Austin because they turned off flock for political reasons. And Rogan responded, what political reasons? Andreessen said, some cities think they're racist technologies that will target people of color and disadvantaged groups. That's how he framed this, right? Very strategic. Rogan says, oh boy, woke politics are really fun. The other problem with this is people are going to think this mass shooting was organized by Flock so they could get reinstated in Austin to bring the surveillance state. Why are you saying this, Joe Rogan?
I didn't think that you said it.
I didn't think about that until you mentioned it, my friend. Exactly. So, and then he goes on. The last thing he says, I guarantee people are going to say we're shills for Flock. This is Rogan, and are promoting a surveillance state. That's the problem now, that whenever there's a mass shooting, we just assume it's a false flag. That's where we're at as a society. So they're constantly doing damage control, in my opinion. Now, I don't know to what level Joe Rogan's entirely complicit in this and aware of that fact, although he does a really good job at times, right, where it's very frustrating. And that's an entirely a different conversation, influencer, industrial complex, anyone. But still, we have to at least address the fact that this totalitarian mass surveillance state is effectively evolving around us, being manufactured and engineered in this very strategic way. And we're going to wake up one day and realize, right, that they effectively achieved their goals. And we are legitimately in that totalitarian technocratic state that we've been warning about for years now. So
I remember the fuck. It's been bugging me for like 10 minutes. There's something I was going to segue into that I totally brain farted when I promoted the call-in. But I did want to provide an example that they have been trying. I mean, there's many examples, but one especially, I guess, more I guess sort of in the, I guess you could say the libertarian-ish community. There was a guy named James Conkin, not his real name, it's a pseudonym. I don't know if we mentioned on here on our dead before. I think I've mentioned on the Morning Dump before, but he got in trouble a while back for saying some saucy things, particularly, I forget the specifics, but they were stuff that, like, if you read it, you could be like, that's totally jokes, but it was kind of alluding to violence. Like, it was kind of like Boogaloo sort of jokes, you know?
Mm-hmm. Who
but
was
James Conkin, and it was regarding agent. It was regarding ICE agents, and they just dropped the case for him now. But it was very clearly First Amendment protected stuff, but they essentially targeted him, saying he was, using violent language against them. Now, it very obviously was like, when you read it, like, these are jokes. But they were, blurring the lines there. But they dropped the case. So, but with that, they're out there looking. So, I mean, it's we're hanging on a thin thread there. But Jacob, looks like we have a caller. I guess we could probably take a call and maybe go to intermission and then come back and talk about aliens.
Hell yeah.
So we actually have Caleb on the line, and Caleb, you're ready to go there, bud.
What's up, Caleb?
Hey, guys. If you can't hear me, just let me know. But, my name's Caleb. I just found your show recently. You guys have your YouTube channel videos have been popping up in my feed for a while, and it's always something I'm interested in. I follow these subjects. There's a lot of stuff you cover I've never heard of before as well. But just within the past week or so, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna catch up with this channel. I'm gonna go back, and so that's what I'm gonna be doing. It's rare to find a channel that's covering that kind of stuff and also doing a good job and being level-headed about it all and everything, which you guys definitely appear to be one of those rare channels. But me and my buddy do a show on YouTube as well, and we're interested in this kind of stuff, and I wanted to extend an invitation to you. We could maybe get together and record something sometime.
Hell yeah, I'd be down,
brother.
Yeah,
absolutely, man.
Yeah, I don't know if you're on Twitter. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. I mean, I guess you can always do email, but yeah, for sure. Definitely hit me up. Hit up Austin. I know probably the same for him as well. I guess I can't volunteer his time, but I'm definitely down. Yeah, for sure. Hit me up. But you got any other questions for the stream before we let you go? Any last things? Appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, me as well.
I was listening to one where you mentioned the Wayfair scandal, and there's selling these items for exorbitant prices, and they always have a name of a missing person or something attached to them.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys can figure out the mathematics behind that, what's the harm in getting a $30,000 deposit into your bank account from some scumbag who's trying to order a filing cabinet from you?
Right.
Somebody should try.
Yeah,
no kidding.
Pretty sure there were a couple Epstein files.
That's all I got, man.
Yeah, but all right, you have a good one, man. Appreciate you. I think there were a couple. But you can go and get the line, Jacob. Appreciate you, caller, calling in. I think I remember there were a couple Epstein file emails, I believe, talking about Wayfair deliveries of
100%.
Yeah,
as well as Rachel Chandler, the child handler, being involved as product manager for Wayfair at the very time that scandal erupted, and that reminded me of Balenciaga, obviously. I mean, so Kim Kardashian's still their ambassador, right, for Balenciaga. And she obviously was in the news recently over the past week in regard to, and if you remember, Balenciaga, I believe they just had a new, absolutely incredible kind of modeling presentation, right? Whatever.
The photograph thing that kind of took legs. This was probably like 6 months to a year ago. There was that photograph thing. It was like a kid's shoot. There was like bondage teddy bears, I think, and like all sorts of suggestive stuff. If you really dug it, and like a lot of people really get into it, it was kind of like a Blue's Clues for schizophrenics of like, you know, looking through all the different stuff of the pictures. But so yeah, I remember, and there was a whole big deal because I think Ye kind of sort of you know. I don't know. It was a whole thing. It was a whole like, you know, everyone's like, what the fuck's up Balenciaga? Everyone's takes.
Yeah, satanic ritual abuse
Ye,
imagery. No doubt was a part of that. Basically, it was the fashion brand Balenciaga, but it was specifically their seasonal kind of catalog, right? Which I think that's kind of how it works. I don't know. I'm not an expert in fashion. The point is that they constantly and consistently brands for the overall Balenciaga brand on these kind of seasonal, presentations, sort of modeling events, right? To model the fashion line, and it looks legitimately like there's just so much pedophile imagery, and beyond that, you have the specific symbolism that. Definitely references directly kind of a ritual blood sacrifice involving children, and they're very young children that are being kind of sexually positioned in these disgusting poses and things of that nature. And it all seems to represent this level of sadism and satanic ritual abuse effectively being presented by the fashion brand. So they, on May 1st, I remember they came out with a new line and had a Balenciaga 2026 fashion model show, right? Fashion show, essentially. And all of these Balenciaga models came out in what looked like essentially the Rothschild ball, right? The masquerade ball that was presented in Eyes Wide Shut. It looks exactly like it, right? And I just found the clip, actually. It's some like girl's TikTok that she was reacting to it that went viral at the time, early May. But I thought it was interesting because it is actually the Balenciaga fashion line and their representation of it. And she just kind of, put her how the TikTok influencers do. They basically force their camera into the overall footage of the event taking place and address it during the moment. But anyway, look at this though, just for a second, because it's crazy. And this was early this month, right? So for the audio listeners, it's just the most satanic imagery you could imagine. These people look dead. It came around the exact same time that what was that event in Hollywood where essentially all the celebrities were dressing up and basically in this very similar way, right? They had similar fashion design that they were using. I forget who exactly it was that, but very prominent celebrities that were dressing up in that very similar sort of, what the hell was the name of that event? Anyway, it just recently occurred over the past couple of weeks where
Met Gala.
Hollywood,
Met Gala.
Yes, thank you, dude. But yeah, it's basically, the Hollywood elite, right? All coalescing in an event center and essentially practicing a legitimate, some sort of satanic ritual, in my opinion, was being conducted at that event, which is par for the course in Hollywood. Not that I have any real evidence of that other than the symbology or symbolism I think is involved. But the reason that I thought of this was because not only is Kim Kardashian still the ambassador for Balenciaga, and that 2022 campaign that they released, the BDSM harnesses and leather harnesses and things of that nature, the kids in bondage, they even reference child porn laws, utilizing props, right, in that 2022 Balenciaga fashion design presentation, whatever you want to call it. But so it almost, at the very least, kind of reinforces the possibility of some of these celebrity cutouts, especially a Kim Kardashian, let's say, who her entire claim to fame is what? Being positioned by essentially being the daughter, right, of OJ's attorney and who died in a very interesting way, and has his own checkered past. Let alone, I think they're legitimately practicing, black magic witches in a coven of some kind in Hollywood, right?
Wasn't
as
it
far as
Ye
I'm
who was
concerned.
saying that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't know if you mentioned it was then it was funny enough, the claim to fame for Kim K, Ray J. He was, I guess he said, I think it was in I don't know if some sort of lawsuits or something, that he essentially was claiming that they were, which is kind of that they were running drugs, which is kind of where this all came from. So that kind of adds some more like, what the fuck is going on over here?
Dude, I saw that, by the way, and I'll get into just briefly those details before we go to intermission here in a moment. But there was one thing that I did see, like, I think it was over a month ago now, but it popped up on my algorithm at one point. And it was the fact that Kim Kardashian bought Marilyn Monroe's actual lock of hair. And what many people are essentially claiming she was attempting to do, and she even effectively admitted as much, is that it was to essentially channel Marilyn Monroe. And so she basically wore Monroe's happy birthday dress, the actual one she wore to sing to JFK at one point. And I think it was, I think it was, someone was essentially making the claim that, this is a sort of black magic witchcraft, way in which a practitioner or initiate would essentially conduct a ritual is by, obviously, physically, right, acquiring an actual lock of hair of an individual you hope to actually channel. And I think knowing that I think she has two separate mentors that are essentially one and the same person, that Michelle Lamy, or whatever her name is, and Marina Abramovich. So it's really not too hard to imagine a world, right, where essentially many of these prominent celebrities and the celebrity class that people find, just to be so appealing in terms of what they prioritize on a daily basis, is really just this smut, essentially, in regard to relationships of the Hollywood elites. I think it's more important to actually consider what these kind of character constructs truly are and where they were manufactured, because it feels like it was in a room in Langley, Virginia, right, to some extent, and that these are practicing occult initiates. But in terms of the actual case of her potentially being involved with her company smuggling $9 million worth of cocaine, well, Kim Kardashian's finally actually come out and addressed this, which I thought was interesting. She responded to the shocking allegations. And so this first kind of was publicly reported when this major smuggling case went public, and a truck carrying legitimate Skims products was stopped at the port of Harwich, I think, in Essex, UK, on September 5th, 2025. So the vehicle had arrived by ferry from Hook of Holland in the Netherlands and was carrying 28 pallets of Skims clothing. The shipment itself was basically, real products from the company, but authorities said neither Skims, the exporter, nor the importer were technically connected to the criminal operation. That's effectively how they saved face and deflected away from any sort of role or involvement from the actual, individuals who owned and ran the company, specifically the importer-exporters being mentioned. But Skims shipment used in cocaine smuggling attempt. So according to the UK's National Crime Agency, border force officers scanned the truck, noticed irregularities in the trailer's construction. A later search uncovered a hidden compartment built into the rear trailer doors. Inside, officers found 90 packages of cocaine. Each package weighed about 2 pounds. Authorities estimated the drugs were worth €7.2 million or roughly $8.4 million. Some reports rounded the value closer to $9 million. Skims issued a statement making clear the company had no involvement. Skims is aware of the recent news involving a shipment with our products. We want to be absolutely clear. Skims had no knowledge whatsoever about the criminal activity. We had no connection to the smuggling operation, the driver, or the truck. So the driver was subsequently sentenced to more than 13 years He was identified as a 40-year-old Jakub Jan Konkel from Kartuzy in northern Poland, apparently. So authorities said he initially denied involvement, but later pled guilty to drug smuggling charges. Investigators claim Konkel agreed to transport the cocaine in exchange for 4,500 euro. He's sentenced at Chelmsford Crown Court to 13 years, 6 months in prison. And one additional point is basically, and obviously they're claiming that these criminals and criminal groups consistently exploit legitimate shipments. And so this is another deflection away from the company itself being involved potentially. They say investigators also reviewed tracking data from the journey and found a 16-minute stop Konkel allegedly failed to report during questioning. Officials believe the drugs were loaded during the stop with the knowledge of both the driver and the organized crime network behind the operation. Either way, this to me is much more of a potential window into how the just in terms of the intelligence apparatus internationally and how they essentially facilitate smuggling operations, trafficking operations, things of that nature. We can never accept the official face value explanation for these things. I think there's usually always an additional layer to consistently probe, right? And you know, I'll hopefully be able to sift through some of the court documents in regard to this case, because I would have to think that the criminal group or the criminal organization that they're trying to pin with the overwhelming and the majority of the guilt, I would have to imagine you have individual perpetrators involved with this criminal network, and I would like to know maybe if this network even has a name in regard to their enterprise and things of that nature, which would potentially just open up the world for legitimate evidentiary examples and details that could provide us with some kind of, avenue forward to understand this a little bit more. But yeah, Kim Kardashian's a cocaine smuggler is basically the bottom line, allegedly.
Mm-hmm. Well, all right, let's take it on over to intermission. We can come back and talk aliens. Before we do so, though, we do have a few super chats I figured we'd address to say thank you for your support. We have Program to Chill says, was late last week, had my days fucked up, not today. Good to have you here with us, brother. Toss Karov for $5 says you guys should get Kurt Mebsker. I think you meant Kurt Metzger. Think he got demonetized. Anytime you guys are live, I always tune in. Already Deadheads. I'd love to have Kurt on. I don't have that sort of pull. I mean, maybe Austin can get Daddy Tripoli to pull some strings or something, but he'd be a great fit. I've been wanting to have him on the show for a long time. I think he'd be a great fit for this show. He'd be a fun one. And then the last one, Rev Paradise, says reading Program to Kill for the first time and the part on the McMartin School is insane. It is. It's a great book. I need to get back to my PTK series. So appreciate all your support. Everyone's super chat. I'm not sure, what side it's on, but it doesn't really matter either way. Appreciate the support all the same. Hit that like button as we're going to intermission. Hey, take a moment, pop on over to the other channel, hit the like button on the other channel as well. Cross-pollinate that shit. Why not? Help a brother out. With that, we'll see you in a few minutes. Roll that beautiful bean footage, Jacob.
Draft your kids to die in wars, and they will never fight themselves. Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. Isn't it pathetic?
We do not want war with Iran. We actually want peace.
If I'm elected president, we are going to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. My plan will cut energy prices in half or more than that. That means we're going down and getting gasoline below $2 a gallon. Our country. Starting on day one, we will end inflation and make America affordable again. Yes, we will make housing much more affordable. As inflation is tamed, a vote for Trump means your groceries will be cheaper.
A vote for Donald Trump is a vote for a man who wants to end wars, not start them.
Nations do not want to fight endless wars. We're getting out of the endless wars. Have to do it. No new war. We don't need the wars, foreign lands, countries you've never heard of, countries that don't even want us there. We will keep America out of foolish, stupid, ridiculous foreign wars.
The plan is to get out of endless wars, to bring our soldiers back home, to not be policing agents all over the world.
We were crazy what we did. We had these endless wars that go on for 21, 22 years, spending billions and billions of dollars.
You know, we'll stay around the country for 15 years, just bomb the hell out of everybody, make everybody miserable. Nobody knows why we're there, you know, the wars that never end. These endless wars that we've been in, I've gotten us out of so many. We don't want to get into wars. We're tired of fighting. I'm the only president in the last 84 years that didn't start a war. Under Trump, we will have no more wars. No more wars. No more wars. We will have prosperity and peace. We will have prosperity and we will have peace. Remember, I'm the president of peace. They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. He's going to start a war. I said, no. My rhetoric is going to keep us out of wars. And that's what happened. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. 2 wars, Venezuela, where we lost nobody, and here we lost 13 people. And I say this, I will end that war in one day. It'll take 24 hours. I know Zelensky well. I know Putin well. But I think you should do, if you're going to do it, then you have to go into Epstein's friend. Still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years.
Favors were sold for cash.
He could only have gotten that idea from Benjamin Netanyahu.
Papa never worked a day in his life.
And Mama, some bad talk going around town saying that Papa had 3 outside children and another wife. And that ain't right.
Heard some talk about Papa doing some storefront preaching, talking about saving souls and all the time leeching, dealing in that and stealing in the name of the Lord. Mama just hold her head and say, Papa. Never was much on thinking. Spent most of his time chasing women and drinking. Mama, I'm depending on you to tell me the truth.
Mama looked up with a tear in her eye and said, son,
Papa was a rolling stone.
Well.
Awesome. Nice intermission there from Jacob. A little bit focusing in on the war issue, focusing a little bit on the hypocrisy of that fellow we have in the White House. It's looking a little bit ridiculous, but hey, he's a peacemaker. He's all about making peace with everybody, with Israel. That's the thing. Everyone has to make peace with Israel, and then we can have no wars. Once everyone makes peace with Israel, that's the big thing. The big thing is they got to make peace with Israel. So I guess it's a little bit of a segue. I figured a good little thing for us to talk about. Looks like we went into the weekend. I haven't had normally this is the sort of stuff I'd cover on the dump, the ins and outs of foreign policy, but we the past couple days had my internet down, but yeah, we went to the weekend, and I think around the week, I don't know if it was like right before markets closed or what, because it's always around markets. Trump's like, oh, we're working on a big deal, we got a deal, and yada, like really talking it up. And then I think it was over the weekend that just seems to be kind of coincidental that I think that's around the time BB essentially flagrantly said, hey, we're butt fucking Lebanon here, and we're doing it. He's like basically he's straight up saying that he's telling them to attack and to advance. Meanwhile, they literally have the flimsiest of ceasefires going. This also was one of the key conditions of any sort of deal that we could perhaps get with Iran, which is what they were talking about. And then in the 11th hour, even with all of that going against it, we had Trump that came in and said, everyone who's signing to be a part of it, which I believe were a number of Gulf Coast countries, or of the Gulf countries were supposed to be essentially getting in on the mix too, and not all of them have normalized with Israel already. I don't really have a running tally in my head, but essentially you're forcing. Not only are you, putting on Iran that they need to normalize with Israel, which is insane. You're bringing in third-party Gulf countries, some of which have. I think Saudi hasn't normalized, and they've
Pakistan as well. Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think UAE, I believe, has. They're basically like a puppet state of Israel, anyways. But
it was Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan. Specifically, Pakistan and Saudi have already came out and said that they will not, normalize with Israel or sign on to this peace proposal. Unless there is an irreversible pathway toward a Palestinian state established. So that's not happening. We know that.
Just even on his face, though, I just got to point out, I just can't even wrap. This is like you have a deal in place, and I know he has emphasized one thing, a talking point I've seen Trump push a lot is this idea of, we don't want to rush it. We want to make sure we do it right. That's how we don't want it. So, but then in the 11th hour to throw in this whole other complicated other issue, normalization with Israel between any of these given countries is like a whole fucking to-do. It's so many different aspects of that's not going to be, I'm sure there isn't some standard cookie cutter, here's what normalization means. It probably means something different for every different country. And so now you're complicating to such an insane degree, and you're creating this was supposed to be essentially a ceasefire or some sort, or I guess not a ceasefire, but some sort of deal. I don't know exactly what they're working out here, but the idea that you're bringing all that other stuff to the table as well, complicating it essentially 10 times more than it already is complicated. I mean, you're having multiple countries now being forced to do some sort of whole other, even more complicated deal at the same exact time. So it's just a boon. It's just retarded on so many levels. It's retarded, and to do it on behalf of that you need to normalize with Israel is such an unbelievable level of cucked that I guess maybe you only really can appreciate it if you're someone who's like a inside baseball foreign policy enjoyer type thing. But it is an unbelievable mask off type moment to me, particularly. Really, yeah.
And I mean the way it's essentially framed is kind of ridiculous, considering that Israel's I think basically Israel came out and demanded an end to the Lebanon ceasefire, right? And Netanyahu himself, as you said, basically claimed an all-out escalation, right? And I think it was we had multiple officials in regard to U.S. officials coming out basically speaking to media outlets and discussing the fact that they would support an Israeli escalation, despite Iran maintaining that a real ceasefire in Lebanon is required for any deal with the U.S., right? So Netanyahu himself says, I have ordered an even greater acceleration of our operations. It is true that they are attacking us with drones, this is Hezbollah, including fiber optic drones, but we have teams working on countermeasures and we will solve the issue. We will intensify our blows, increase our firepower, and we will crush them. And so this is, we're not acting in good faith. And if U.S. officials completely endorse this escalation, then you're already, right, clearly this is a disingenuous peace proposal. And just seeing, like, I think it was in February, obviously, that the real war was escalated and between U.S. and Israel, and the airstrikes on Iran and the assassination of the diplomatic leader, or the leadership of the Ayatollah and things of that nature, the direct bombardment of the nuclear sites and all of that. And I think it was April is obviously whenever the ceasefire was agreed upon, right? That was clearly entirely fragile and not going to last for long whatsoever. And the ceasefire kayfabe is the way we put it, if I remember correctly. But Trump announced the complete memorandum with Iran for a 60-day ceasefire extension, reopening the Strait of Hormuz, unfreezing assets, and future nuclear talks, while urging Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and others to normalize ties with Israel. Israeli Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir rejected any deal harming Israel. And that's what I thought was interesting as well, because Itamar Ben-Gvir came out and he had some strong words in terms of this alleged peace proposal. He says, basically, he says, we will not allow this to happen. A bad agreement for the state of Israel can harm human life. This is legitimately his statement. And so,
when we harm human life.
Yeah. So I think Pakistan, Saudi Arabia are basically the only Muslim countries rejecting the Abraham Accords and any normalization with Israel, reaffirming their commitment to Palestine. So they already came out and effectively made that statement, said they will in no way normalize tensions. And then you have none other than usual suspect, U.S. Democratic Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, coming out on CNN criticizing the unfreezing of Iranian funds. And Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, obviously, are still insisting on Palestinian statehood. And apparently that inherently pauses any sort of right agreements or proposal essentially being stalled. And that's, I think, why you'll see Trump's language shift and become more aggressive here very shortly. If not, I'm sure there are already reports. But this is what I thought was interesting, though, because basically, well, first, you should look at this hilarious, like, brief clip of Debbie Wasserman Schultz doing some ridiculous sort of mental gymnastics in terms of why she opposes a negotiated deal to end the war. She criticizes any negotiation whatsoever and says, we're going to unfreeze Iranian assets and give them billions of dollars to be able to control proxies again. And actually watch her, because she is the most just disgusting example of the permanent establishment. And we all know she has a very strange record in that little county in Florida, right? What is that county again? Where all the most, do you remember? I believe that's where Epstein, where, like, many different examples of cases being litigated in that county, and her essentially.
Palm Beach?
No, maybe, but I don't remember. So it's a district sort of thing, right? So it's like, I can't recall.
Yeah, I don't know the name of the district. Yeah.
Yeah. Either way, it's heavily overrepresented, is the point I'm making, right? In terms of these high impact events essentially being prioritized and given to her district. And so she could essentially facilitate the cover up, is the point I'm attempting to make, basically. But yeah, listen to her reaction to the peace proposal.
I am concerned and frustrated over, again, another potential deal, a negotiation where we're going to unfreeze Iranian assets and give them billions of dollars to be able to control proxies again and to rebuild their ballistic missile program, never mind their drone
Dade
program,
County.
which is incredibly deadly, and they've been increasing their drone capability. So this is deeply concerning. And look, I'm glad that Iran, their capability militarily has been degraded. But if what we get from this initial deal is just going back to where we were before, where Iran did not control the Strait of Hormuz, then what has been accomplished?
So that is what we're dealing with as far as the political class that it's consistently reelected, which makes no sense whatsoever. Obviously, her connection to Hillary Clinton, the Clinton administration, she's a longstanding asset in the swamp, let's say, right? And the point being is that, for this person to be relied upon to have an opinion or even be brought on a platform such as a CNN, which we already should be well aware of, these Mockingbird media publications and establishments. But this is just another permanent establishment Democrat, right, who comes out to oppose any sort of peace negotiations, to provide anyone who opposes Trump with a legitimate excuse to justify essentially continuing this conflict, which is fascinating to imagine the way in which you would ideologically oppose Trump and the foreign policy, which
this is a political winner. Like, she's going further than most people. Most Democrats are just like not getting involved because they're like they want to be able to at least give the appearance that they're against the Iran stuff going on, but they know this is a political, like they're crushing it politically because this is just the right side of the aisle, essentially tanking their credibility day by day by day. And like, if they really did lift enough of a finger to actually make something substantive happen, then they no longer have a thing to grift off of or to make themselves look better by contrast. So it is this, like, they don't really, they are slightly incentivized to like rhetorically speak out, but they're only incentivized to act to the degree to where to put on the air of actually wanting something to happen. Now, if they actually made it stop, now I'm not saying they would like actively vote against it, but they may not vociferously go out there to do X, Y, and Z like they may otherwise. So yeah.
The county is Broward County, by the way. If somebody said that in the private chat just now, and that registers with me, so somebody look it up if you don't mind. But either way, very terrible record, historically speaking, in terms of her personally and her involvement in that region. So not all that surprised. I think it is the area where Palm Beach is represented, if I remember correctly, though I'm not entirely certain. But the point that I'm making in terms of Trump's language in regard to this disingenuous peace proposal is he already has provided himself with the justification for an escalation. So this could just be the window dressing of this softened language. And in reality, it's, hey, we tried, and here's how we now escalate from here. And what did he say? He said Trump claims it's mandatory. Dave DeCamp published this yesterday. Trump says it's mandatory for Muslim nations to join Abraham Accords as part of Iran deal. The president threatened that if the accords aren't expanded, full-scale war will restart, quote, bigger and stronger than ever before. So, I mean, what are we even talking about here, right? And if you even consider the connection between the timing, as you stated earlier, in regard to Netanyahu coming out and announcing the full escalation in Lebanon, we all know that hinges on the negotiation process with Iran and these Arab countries. I mean, there's no way that they're okay and they're going to sign off on this full and blatant military escalation by Israel in Lebanon, as it stands in the moment. And he launched a massive attack already. Negotiations will more than likely entirely collapse as a result. And this is a disingenuous peace proposal, a half-measured ceasefire, and I think it will collapse, in a very short time. Unfortunately, there's one little clip that we might play, just because I think it's kind of interesting the way in which they stated that because we had just launched new sort of attacks and strikes on Iran, and they try to frame it as self-defensive strikes, right? That's legitimately not that it was preemptive. They legitimately claimed it was self-defense, that we were militarily striking a foreign nation, right? And it's just at a certain point, it's kind of extraordinary level of dishonest, framework and media representation. And man, it really just shows the state of the Mockingbird media in reality, and as far as the vast majority of the most prominent publications in general, kind of doing the bidding, right, of the imperial war machine. But yeah, it's self-defense, right?
U.S. launching what it calls self-defense strikes in Iran. A senior official tells us the strikes targeted boats laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz, as well as a surface-to-air missile site.
So all this is talks to end the war taking place in Qatar. President Trump saying the negotiations are proceeding nicely. And overnight, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who was flying and traveling a lot over the Memorial weekend, said the following on board his plane.
I think there's strong alignment and agreement on what a preliminary draft should look like. But this is, it's either going to be a good deal or there isn't going to be one.
So now, Alex Hoff reports from the White House. Senator Dave McCormick is on deck with reaction. But we begin with the reporting from Trey Yinks. He is live in Tel Aviv to get us update on where we are today and really what happened over the long weekend. Trey, hello to you.
Yeah, hey, Bill, good morning. Overnight, the United States conducted airstrikes against southern Iran near the Strait of Hormuz and the city of Bandar Abbas. According to U.S. Central Command, these strikes were defensive in nature and went after the mine-laying vessels around this area, along with the surface-to-air missile position. These were the first U.S. strikes that have targeted Iran since early May. The strikes do come amid the backdrop of an ongoing diplomatic effort to reach an agreement between Iran and the United States. Overnight, President Trump laid out a serious condition, saying on Truth Social, the enriched uranium nuclear dust will either be immediately turned over to the United States to be brought home and destroyed, or preferably in conjunction and coordination with the Islamic Republic of Iran, destroyed in place or at another acceptable location, with the Atomic Energy Commission or its equivalent being witness to this process and event. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, a regional intelligence official told Fox News, no less important is the dismantlement of Iran's enrichment facilities. That way, not only will Iran...
This is a longer segment. We're obviously not going to watch the entire thing, but there's like 2 more minutes I find to be important enough for the show, and just in terms of kind of outlining this process and also the disingenuous framework. But I did think clearly this narrative of nuclear dust, and they're still very much trying to present this fabricated.
This ain't happening. By the way, I believe it's actually the Supreme Leader has come out and said, because one of the big sticking points is this nuclear enrichment thing, because it gets framed by the West, the United States, as they will have no nukes, and what they mean by that is there's enrichment. Iran's, there was literally a fatwa issued by the guy that they killed, saying that it would have no nukes. So they've explicitly said they will have no nukes, but if you're playing, weird definition games, you can kind of sort of make this make sense. Yep. But either way, just recently, the son of the Supreme Leader, the one they fucking killed, and then also killed a shitload of his family members at the same time, he recently, I don't think it was actually considered a fatwa, but it was, coming from the lips of the Supreme Leader, which has a little bit more religious import than just, some of the military leaders or something that they have there. He came out and said, okay, I guess back up a little bit. There have been floated around a few times this idea of some sort of like third option when it comes to enrichment, because, Iran's insisted that they will not reduce their enrichment. They will not give away their enriched material. Yada, yada, yada. But there has been this float around this idea of like a third party, and that like there's some sort of joint, maybe they keep the stuff at some other, neutral third, like a Russia or something. They can keep their nuclear material there, so where they don't have ready access to it. So it creates this like other, which is fine, whatever. This would have been a good But I believe this was actually, I don't know if they explicitly said it. I think I feel like I vaguely recall reading somewhere that this is actually what caused it. But some of the boisterous retardation that you've seen from Trump and this ongoing back and forth when it comes to his diplomacy with Iran has led them to essentially become more and more calcitrant in their positions.
Right.
As they're seeing, anytime they make any sort of good faith behavior or move with him, the next thing he knows, he's going online and acting a fucking fool. And so he eventually said, like, we are not getting rid of any, like, there will be nothing's, like, no nuclear is going anywhere. We're not reducing like pretty much close that down completely. So now they might be open to some other something, but they will have nuclear enrichment by the end of this. Like,
oh yeah.
So like, there's just not really any foreseeable possibility where you do not end up with a worse situation than what we had before they entered in this conflict, and furthermore, a worse deal than the original Obama JCPOA deal. It's going to be an L on all accounts, and I just don't know how Trump's going to be able to spin that and take that L. And they have like 6 months before the midterm, so they're just getting closer and closer and closer with this incredibly awful hot potato, the whole time. So it's something to behold at the very least.
Absolutely, man. And I do think the way that, obviously it's Fox News we're dealing with here, but the way in which they frame the peace proposal and the Middle Eastern nations and countries involved, allegedly up, I think it's specifically 8, and Trump's demanding that more are sign on mandatory. Apparently it's a part of the Abraham Accords for this proposal to even be considered legitimately negotiable. It's basically now mandatory for these specific nations to sign on to the peace proposal and basically agree to the negotiation process, which is absurd. I mean, that certainly proves the lack of good faith negotiations here. And as far as what they hope to achieve out of this, I think we already know the end result is they strategically want the worst possible outcome to transpire. I legitimately am of that mind at this point, because I feel as if they hope for a global escalation, for a legitimate international conflict at large, and this will almost become. I'm not really certain that the just consensus with the general public is really even that concerned in terms of the longer a military conflict plays out, the less sort of concern the general public really even has personally in regard to the issue at large. So I kind of see that almost playing into their hands strategically and unfortunately, but because again, it's up to strange foreign policy nerds and people who just want to essentially hold the political class accountable for their actions, who are paying attention to the details in regard to any of these foreign policy positions and things of that nature as well. So here we are, right, dealing with people who effectively are of the mind that history began yesterday, and the lack of historical context in regard to these conflicts as well is only going to lead them down the wrong path as far as any sort of conclusion in regard to policy. But there's only a couple more minutes left on this, and I'll pull the plug on it. And basically, I have one more. There's a rabbi who came out. One more kind of dovetail note on this. A rabbi came out and effectively claimed that Trump is in the process and has effectively started the Messianic process.
Oh shit!
So
we might be on that for a minute. That's something I've been wanting to talk. We'll go on. Sorry.
Awesome.
I'm looking for something while you present this,
and then we'll pivot.
Not have enriched material, they also won't have the means to enrich more. The key to preventing Iran from getting its hands on a nuclear weapon is taking the bullets, but also taking the gun itself. The other key issue has to do with the Strait of Hormuz. Secretary of State Marco Rubio reiterated the Trump administration position on this critical waterway during a gaggle today.
Gaggle.
The straits have to be open. They're going to be open one way or the other. So they need to be open. What's happening there is unlawful. It's illegal. It's unsustainable for the world. It's unacceptable. That cannot happen. The straits need to be open, unimpeded, without tolls, and obviously that needs to happen immediately as soon as anything.
We're also tracking developments in the conflict between Israel and Iran's largest proxy, Hezbollah. The Israelis have vowed to ramp up strikes on the group amid ongoing drone and rocket attacks launched from southern Lebanon.
I want to bless the residents of the North's resilience that inspires all of us. But what this requires of us now is to increase the blows, to increase the intensity. We will smite them with overwhelming force.
A regional source told Fox News later this week additional talks will take place between the Israeli and Lebanese governments aimed at increasing diplomatic ties between the two countries and disarming Hezbollah. Bill?
Trey, thanks. Nice to see you leading our coverage on a
It's
Tuesday,
almost
Tel
over.
Aviv. Thank
There's
you.
a brief
Now to the White
additional
House,
segment
Alexandria
here.
Hoff live on the North Lawn for us. Good morning, Alex.
Well, good morning to you. As it was already mentioned, the president said that these negotiations are proceeding nicely, with the focus still centering around the so-called nuclear dust being removed from Iran. But there's also this broader regional framework that's being introduced in all of this. On Saturday, the president had a conference call with 8 Arab nation leaders. He followed up with a Truth Social post writing this. I stated that after all the work done by the United States to try to pull this very complex puzzle together, it should be mandatory that all of these countries, at a minimum, simultaneously sign on to the Abraham Accords.
Good
Now,
luck.
the UAE and Bahrain, they were part of that call. They're already members of the U.S.-backed effort to normalize relations with Israel. The president acknowledges that 1 or 2 of the nations may have reasons for not being able to do so, but that most others should be ready and willing. Senator Lindsey Graham called the proposal requiring the agreement be expanded simply.
Well, that's when you know you're fucked up in terms of you made a huge mistake. If Lindsey Graham essentially agrees with your policy or your position on something, I think you should question whether you're taking the right position. And yeah, he apparently finds this to be a brilliant proposal that Trump is enacting in this moment.
Brilliant and, quote, would result in the most significant change in the Middle East in thousands of years. But at the same time, the emerging deal is drawing some criticism from several other Republicans. Senator Ted Cruz says he is deeply concerned. Axios reporting that the draft proposal also includes a 60-day ceasefire. For that, Armed Services Chairman Senator Roger Wicker posting the rumored 60-day ceasefire with the belief that Iran will ever engage in good faith would be a disaster. Everything accomplished by Operation Epic Fury would be for naught.
Boom. That's enough, in my opinion, as far as realizing the dishonest representation of this peace proposal in the first place. I think the individuals of prominence that they obviously used as an example in order to stage the kind of interpretation and influence therein in terms of the audience that they are basically deceptively kind of leading through this false framework, it goes to show, right, what their intentions truly are. And I view this as entirely intended to fail to begin with, right? And once more, just another kind of red herring for us to basically prioritize and focus on. It's almost a distractionary tactic to provide individuals who would effectively be willing to consent to this type of foreign policy. It allows them the justification necessary for them to move forward in that framework and mindset, thinking they're ethically centered, as if they understand this conflict at large and the legislation being enacted at the ground level. And clearly that's not the case. So these are political puppets, right, entirely being controlled by the puppet masters of unelected bureaucrats deciding our fate in private rooms, right? So essentially in DC. So good luck in terms of staving off this further escalation as far as this conflict in particular is concerned. And I believe it's by design, essentially laying the groundwork for a continued escalation in this realm. So I'm not at all optimistic, unfortunately, about how this military policy will continue forward. But
yeah,
anyway, man.
Yeah, you're talking about you said something assuming end times eschatology related.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of in the anti-war world. I was trying to find the report. I couldn't find it. I found a few that are like sort of swirling around it as you were talking, because as you mentioned, there was something I've been wanting to talk about. But anyways, long story short, apparently there's been some shenanigans going on in the owning of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, I haven't been able to find the specific report, so I'm a little hazy in the details. But essentially, the idea is it's currently, I think it's Jordan, I think, that has custody of it, or something like that, of that area. And it's essentially a Muslim site. It's a mosque. Well, now they're talking about transitioning the ownership over to, I'm not quite sure who, but a different group. This is being obviously finagled by the Ben Gavirs of the world and the Huckabees of the world. So the U.S. and Israel kind of working together here, and they're wanting to make it, essentially stripping it of its explicitly Muslim identity that it currently has, and making it almost what they're purporting, although I have a hard time believing this will be what it ends up being, is some sort of a religious center to respect all three of some sort. Like, that's the way they're selling it currently. So I find that, as we're in these end times when Al-Aqsa seems to come up all too often, and they've made a point to wanting to more Judaize it and make it, which I guess, to be fair, in their argument, if you're making it neutral, that would, by its nature, to some degree, Judaize it. But I know I have my concerns. But yeah, anyways, what was the piece you were or what were you bringing here? So I'm assuming it's something in that line of thinking.
It blew me away, honestly, because I had never actually watched. Now, this rabbi is very notorious from my recollection. Rabbi Mendel Kassin. He essentially comes out, makes a public statement that Trump has started the Messianic process. And he says, in the Messianic age, basically white Christians, Isov, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but white Christians, essentially Christian Zionists, are what they've become through various deceptive conditioning practices, obviously through the psychological effects of the mind war. But yeah, they must serve the Jewish race, white Christians, and assist in any of their needs, right? So he goes on further to explain the esoteric role of Trump. The 45th president was meticulously placed into office because of his role as a Gilgul, an incarnation, to lead the Goyim into obedience of the Jewish nation. His main job, apparently, this is as Rabbi Mendel Kassin reveals, is, quote, only to assist the Jews. The concept of, now I'm not sure if this is Gilgul or how exactly to pronounce it, Gilgul, Neshimot, in basic terms refers to prophet-like figures that arise over time, which are seen as spiritual incarnations that have aided Jews in the previous generations. So basically, and it was also it was referenced in and revealed in a book from 2004 called The Way to the Top, when Trump admits that he was trained by a Mekubal, Eitan Yardeni. So now what's interesting is Markubal, I don't know, Mekubal, Mekubal. Now I looked this up, this term specifically, because I was unaware of what this meant. Mekubal is Hebrew terminology for a traditional Kabbalist or a person who studies and practices Kabbalah, the esoteric mystical tradition within Judaism. The word derives from the Hebrew root KBL, meaning to receive, thus defining a Mekubal as one who receives or as a receiver. In this context, the term signifies an individual who has received, preserved, and transmitted the inner dimension or hidden secrets of the Torah through an unbroken chain of teacher-to-disciple transmission. Unlike a speculative philosopher or poet, a Mekubal is viewed as a recipient of sacred wisdom that was traditionally handed down orally and is meant only for the pious and deeply learned. So, I'm just saying, Trump's chaos magic, right, takes a whole nother meaning in terms of my just kind of the way in which I internalize this information. I'm not entirely certain whether this rabbi is the end-all, be-all resource or reference point that we can deem as credible enough to effectively determine that this is the path that they've essentially laid out for Trump to really kind of in a way just achieve this just in terms of the overall end result of how they would kind of weaponize his personality, his prominent kind of again, I feel as if they utilize these celebrity cutouts essentially, right? Which we all know Trump has a genealogical position here. We should understand the right Trump's family dynamic in terms of his father, in terms of right just his mentor Roy Cohn, which we've said so many different times is a perfect example of how sexual blackmail is the ultimate currency in DC. This is how you move up. So you could easily imagine a world where now Trump has been awarded many different sort of Kabbalistic achievements within the framework of rabbinical kind of acknowledgments, right? As far as like the most spiritual and highest level in terms of the hierarchy and position in Israel have basically lauded over President Trump's from day one. And he was effectively, the ultimate Zionist, right, as far as like a figure who could effectively achieve the most you could ever even imagine possible. The Christian Zionists were effectively all in terms of the original first administration, and especially in regard to his reelection campaign. So I do believe that it's a possibility, obviously, and we've mentioned in the past, his deep relationship that apparently goes back years and years in terms of being rewarded these strange things that are effectively basically presented in his office as crowning achievements from basically notorious rabbis that essentially kind of at the very least they kind of present Trump to be this sort of divine prophecy playing out, right? They lean into that very heavily as far as this is a legitimate candidate that could effectively achieve those means, right, in terms of the end result. And I do think that there is some sort of spiritual battle playing out here in terms of this divine manufactured false prophecy, right? That they're sort of representing in this false framework to the public. So I could see a world, is the point I'm making, where effectively Trump is and has been crowned as the potential prominent figure responsible for starting this messianic process in regard to, the Kabbalistic kind of agenda at large. So I do think the Kabbalah plays much more of a pivotal role, factors in far heavier than we would ever want to imagine. And it seems to, unfortunately, resurface far too often for any sort of, comfort, in my opinion. So, but I did see Marjorie Taylor Greene. Did you see her go on Alex Jones' show? And she basically says that President Trump has a secret plan to cancel the 2028 election and remain in power for a third term. Yeah, remember who was saying that from day one, dude. I'm not saying that's possible, but I will say that she personally claimed on the show that this war and military conflict could be used as the justification to suspend the election process. Mm-hmm. She believes it's incredibly dangerous and no one should ever accept it. Who knows about MTG, obviously, but I do think there's something to this. I've been seeing it far too often for me to legitimately not consider it as a possibility, right? Mm-hmm. And Trump specifically, man, like he has become the precedent-setting operation, the pretext that you could never imagine achieving so much. And man, I think there was a report, by the way, that came out about Jared Kushner, about him potentially being in danger, immediate danger, due to some sort of Iranian assassination. Basically, the claim was, this was from a former CIA analyst. They're reporting that Fred Fleets is his name, right? And I think he had like a strange background, He basically was former chief of staff for the National Security Council, former senior staff House Intelligence Committee, and he also was a former CIA analyst. And he comes out and reports that Jared Kushner's life is in immediate danger due to an Iranian assassination threat against him for, quote, being Jewish and for converting Ivanka Trump to Judaism. I was like, wow, what a motivating sort of, in terms of the motive in itself, absolutely hilarious. And he says there are multiple active threats against President Trump, including threats to target his family. He's definitely in danger. This is just another reason why we went to war with Iran. So this is another low-hanging fruit, easy enough to pick in terms of Trump's base justifying any of these military actions against Iran. Because clearly, I mean, the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting, oh my God, we have to take these threats seriously. Why are they trying to kill my president? If that's really how you feel, you're so vulnerable and naive. I'm concerned for your well-being. That's all I'm going to say. But I'll leave it at that. I did think it was funny, though.
Yeah, it is. Well, we're almost at 2 hours. I'd like to have a little time to hang out with the patrons. So let's go ahead and bring it in for a landing, Austin. You want to let people know where they can find you at, and we'll go ahead and get out of here.
All right, brother. Yeah, you guys can find me at the Underclass Podcast, obviously, and definitely subscribe to the YouTube and the Rumble, please. I think, as I've said before, the dystopian YouTube overlords are very much hyperactive in the current moment, so you never know what's to come. And beyond that, I think we're about to do episode 58 of whatever this is tonight as well. So check that out. I'll be out by tomorrow. And other than that, yeah, beware, because apparently the CIA is hunting down alien human hybrids through 23andMe, obviously, which we unfortunately didn't get to discuss, but I'm sure it will happen at some point.
We did.
In the future.
That's the same. We talked about the whole Trump being the chosen one. It's due to his Nordic blood. That's what it is. His Nordic blood. The Greys are trying to control him and tap into his Nordic power. His Nordic heritage. So that's what's going on the world stage.
Man, they're back. Oh my God. I legitimately am. All it makes me think of, obviously, is Delphi every time, and I think of that Nordic strain of Odinists that allegedly were represented. Well, I very much believe they were, but still, the pagan connection is something worthy of note. And don't ever forget that these satanic rituals, these blood sacrifices, this is all orchestrated by these ancient pagan ritualistic practices from these initiates over time. They've evolved them, sophisticated these practices and methods, through various factions and ideological twists and turns. But ultimately, it's a sinister concept, and in no way should we turn a blind eye to the fact that these are legitimate paganists, illegitimate pagan, but they legitimately practice this ancient form of paganism. And I think that in no way has this been diluted over time. I think it's only been essentially ordained by the vanguard of the hidden knowledge, the esoteric, community that effectively is just initiated into this world of knowledge, of hidden knowledge and esoteric practices. That is who we need to always focus on, because in reality, they've created a false framework, a deceptive sort of veil of a fictional reality that doesn't exist. And so that is for the general public to engage in, as if this cartoonish world is what actually surrounds us, when in reality, the threat is far more sinister. This is an ancient battle, I think, playing out in modern day, and we're just kind of waking up in the middle of the movie of trying to figure out the plot. And so I couldn't be more grateful, for everyone showing up here, for the relationships I have with you, and I just think that, and anyone else who I've basically come into contact with throughout this process, it's just been ultimately a blessing. And knowing that we aren't isolated, fighting this battle solitarily alone, right? Yeah, that gives me hope and inspiration moving forward. So I love you all, and I appreciate you, brother, as always, man.
Hell yeah, dude. For those who want to support what I'm doing, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can find the show on YouTube, Rumble, all the major audio podcatchers, and Twitter as well. On Twitter, that's at @TowerGangJose. Everywhere else, that's the No Way Jose podcast. If you want to support the show in the best way you can, you do with money over at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. Top left. Oh, never mind. That's not. I don't have the QR code here today, but normally I do. Sorry, fuck that up. Ignore that. And if you so patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. Lowest level's $2, gives you access to a whole host of perks. I try to give you guys 1 to 2 episodes per week. Try to keep about 3 to 4 behind the paywall at any given time. Also give you guys access to ad-free RSS feed. Give you access to Telegram, the pre-show and the post-show, and video calls on the show right here, Already Dead, which is on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. I also give a big shout out. The highest level of my Patreon is a big thank you for their support. My previous co-host Tower Gang, at Learn Toad, also at Brigade D's, at ZVRCK, at _Vizil, Tim Tell, at Johnny Klebo, big fan of the show, Torn May. At Wayne Tackers, One Recover Kids, No Free Lunch, Jack, Mark Vestibule, Jacob Wintergad, Biblical Energy Podcast, and John Black, that big, beautiful bastard. And with that, guys, I will not see you tomorrow for the morning dump. I will be back on Thursday, but I do think I will be dropping around the time I normally do the dump. I do believe I'll be dropping the latest in the Dutroux series I had with Austin, which me and you did that like months ago at this point. So
right.
Just another emphasis, what you guys get for Behind the Paywall. That has been behind the paywall for, I think, literally months. That's how it works sometimes. I also have I believe I should have Matt Wolfson coming back on tomorrow, another paywall episode. But with that, guys, we'll see you on the next one. Subscribe, like, do all the things, support us. Please help a brother out. Help me, help Austin. Everybody like it on one platform, go the other, like it there, tell your friends, play it on your grandma's phone, do all the things. Love you all. Bye-bye. We're out of here.